This season of the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast is proudly supported by My Music staff.
We need something that gives us that sense of well-being and health emotionally, and music gives us that. There's no doubt about it.
Welcome to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast, the place where teachers from around the world meet to share innovative ideas about music education. Listen and learn as we help you motivate your students, grow your income, expand your studio, and become a more creative piano teacher.
Welcome, everybody. That was the sound of 150 podcast episodes. Woohoo! Go us, go me, go you. It's so cool to be here, and I'm so excited to share this episode with you. My 150th, wrapping up 2018 and season 4 of the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. And if you haven't met me yet and this is your first listen, well, you've chosen a very special episode to tune in. My name is Tim Topham, your host for the show. And whether this is your first time listening or this is your 150th time listening, I truly, truly value your time and the commitment you're showing to your students and your studio and to music in general. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you are one of those people who've listened to just about every episode, then a very special warm welcome to you and, of course, to my Inner Circle community members. This podcast is your home for inspiration and ideas, business and teaching strategies to help support your teaching and grow your studio. And in today's episode, I've got no less than 6 amazing guests joining me at the same time. Yes, this hasn't actually been done on the podcast before, which is why I wanted to save it for the 150th. And these 6 people are all expert teachers in my Inner Circle membership. And they are internationally renowned authors, speakers, bloggers, podcasters, and teachers. And they're here to share their thoughts on the future of piano teaching as we look towards 2019 and beyond. And I'm also truly stoked to be finally launching my very first physical product, which you can have shipped to your door in time for the Christmas break, as long as you're listening to this around its launch time early December and you get onto this really quickly. It's my Ultimate Creative Piano Teaching Podcast Bundle delivered to your door on USB, and I will tell you all about what's in that and how much it costs and how to get hold of it a little later in today's episode. Today's show notes and full transcript are available now, as always, at timtopham.com/episode 150. I'm going to leave it to my guests today to introduce themselves when we kick off the interview in just a second. They will introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them before we get into the bulk of the interview. So my guests today are the following amazing teachers, and I can't thank them enough for not only being experts in my inner circle, but also for all the amazing resources that they share with teachers around the world. And many of you will definitely have heard of these teachers, and many of you will know their resources and perhaps are already using them in your studio. So my guests today are Bradley Sowash, Paul Myatt, Lindell Kennedy, Tom Donald, Forrest Kinney, and the amazing Nicola Canton. All right, let's cue the interview. Well, I'm super excited to welcome 6 guests onto this podcast. This is an absolute record. And for those listening, you'll be very soon meeting my 6 very special guests as we go around the room for a very quick welcome. So I'll ask that everyone just quickly lets people listening know your name, where you're based, and also the focus of your business or what you do for teachers. And I reckon we might just start with Bradley, please.
Okay, hi, I'm Bradley Sowash, and I work out of Columbus, Ohio. I help recovering classical pianists put their books away and learn to play the music in their hearts through online group jazz piano lessons.
Love it.
Great. I'm Nicola Canton. I'm in Dublin in Ireland, and I help teachers teach more creatively and with gamification ideas at vibrantmusicteaching.com and my blog Colourful Keys. And I also help Tim in the Inner Circle.
My name's Paul Myatt. I'm from Sydney, Australia. I help teachers teach differently using group teaching and whole body learning strategies. That means students learn more effectively, have fun, keep playing longer, so teachers can gain enjoyment from teaching and earn more money. And my music school network is called Forte School of Music. which is fortemusic.com.
Great, and I'm Lindell Kennedy. Hi, everybody. I'm the creator of Inner Musician, and the two programs that I teach are Player Story and our newest Scorer Story. And the whole emphasis of my teaching is that I love to teach students to play through improvisation and to read through composition. So getting that kind of self-generative idea happening to really concrete the learning, and also to inspire students. So we have movies and soundtracks and play spontaneously to those fantastic environments that students can kind of lock into through storytelling. So, and I'm over here in Perth, Western Australia.
Yes, hi, I'm Forrest Kinney, and I'm in Seattle, Washington. Actually, I'm about 40 miles east of Seattle, but nobody knows what North Bend is, so I always say Seattle. My focus is creativity. I'm interested in being creative when interpreting, when composing, when improvising, and when arranging. And so all my materials are about what I call the 4 arts and creativity. So that's why I'm here. I'm very pleased to be with you all.
And hi, I'm Tom Donald from the London Contemporary School of Piano. I'm the founder of the London Contemporary School of Piano. I am an Australian Londoner. I've lived in London for the last 12 years. I'm an improvisation pianist, and as a teacher, our movement is very much about creativity. It's about musical inclusiveness. It's about having an outrageous amount of fun. Whatever your age, your level is in the experience, that is music.
Love it. Well, if that's not one of the best collections of creative pedagogues, music educators around the world, I don't know what is. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. We're all in different time zones, and I think Lindell wins for the most unpleasant time zone. She has been up since 5:30 to 4:30. Is it? What time is it now?
Yeah, how did you know that? Oh, I emailed you.
Yeah. So congratulations, Lindell. That is a huge commitment, and you look fabulous for that hour of the day. I certainly don't normally.
Hey, look, I put the bling on so that we could bring the celebratory fantastic congratulations to you, Tim.
Well, thank you.
Episodes.
Well, look,
awesome.
And all of you have contributed in some way to the podcast. Some of you on multiple episodes. Many of you have been on webinars or on written blog articles. So you have all contributed. And so this is as much a thank you from me to you as in any other direction. So I really do appreciate everything you've done and everything that you're doing for the teachers of the world. So what I've invited the guests today to do is to pose a question or thought or something that's been in their minds recently on the topic of the future of music education. And so I thought we'll give each of our panelists a chance to have a second, let us know what that is. And then depending on how much time we've got for each person, anyone else that wants to jump in and give a response, support or argue the point against it or whatever it is, we'll be able to do that. So let's see how that all goes. And we're going to start with me. I'm just going to put myself first and put out something that I've been thinking of recently. And it's actually around the nature of recitals as assessments or final ways of measuring student achievement in music education. My thinking is more and more that maybe when we're being really creative in our lessons and we're taking different approaches that isn't always about reading a score and performing it, that recitals might not actually be the best way to assess whether a student's actually having success in a music lesson. It might be part of it, but it might not be the whole thing. And I was thinking a lot about this when I went to Education Changemakers last year, which is a conference here in Melbourne. And we heard from a high school in America that does all their assessment by project-based assessment. So students work on a project for a significant amount of time, and then at the end of that time, they actually present to their class and their parents and a small group of people about what they've done. So they, rather than just sitting an exam or something like that, they're actually demonstrating their ability to do something. And so for me, obviously I teach a lot of chord-based things, composing, an ability to teach pop music, but just being able to play a pop song or play a composition, maybe that's not what it's all about. Maybe it's about being able to understand or teach another group of people that this is how music works and this is the chord structure of this song, or to be able to analyze something. So I've got that. That's kind of my thinking there. Let me know if you've got any thoughts, any of you guys, whether I'm on the right track or it's all a bit crazy, and really the recital in whatever form it takes is always going to be the main assessment.
I love it. I'm just going to jump straight in there, Tim, and say, I think that when we perform, it's like we have on display the book cover, but you have no idea what's going on inside that book, and so to work assessment around projects is so great because you get to really dive into the musicality that's inside, what has been learnt, but more than that, what's actually been absorbed and what is now becoming part of that whole musical experience of students. I'm with you. I love that.
Thanks, Lindell. And Forrest?
I'm often encourage teachers to boycott the word assignments in lessons because it's so dictatorial, it's so hierarchical. I always say, a creative person lives by projects. A creative person's bouncing from one project to another, and they define their lives in terms of their projects. So to me, what you're saying is beautiful because it aligns completely with what creators do. And what we want them to do is being obsessed by this project and then that project and then sharing it with the world. So 2 thumbs up on that one.
Thanks, Forrest. Yeah, Bradley.
Yeah, well, I haven't done recitals. I dropped them years and years ago. I did 1 or 2, saw the damage it was causing, and actually have reached a position where I'm opposed to recitals because, as I said earlier, about working with recovering classical pianists, even though that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, I really do spend a lot of my time fixing up burnt wings that were mostly caused by the horror of sitting alone by yourself in front of an audience perceived to be a bunch of critics or whatever. And I think it has to do with our instrument of piano in particular because it's a solo instrument. In an ensemble, or when you're in a student ensemble, there's all that fun and you're kind of in the back row or the middle row, and it's kind of some of the responsibility is shared. But to put masterful student in front of what they perceive to be a highly discerning audience, whether that be the truth or not, I think is probably the number one reason that people stop playing this instrument.
Well, you got a thumbs up from Forrest. 2 thumbs up. There you go. Paul, we might not your comment the last one on this, so we can go on to the next topic.
Oh, sure. I was just going to say, if we were to step it back from, because I think maybe you're talking about teenagers, but if you start that process from a much younger age in a group, if you're teaching in a group, then children get used to playing in front of other people, and which is mostly the terror that people have. And in a group environment, if they have that experience from a young age, then they feel much more confident and comfortable playing in front of other people later on. And so I think that's a really great way of, obviously for performance, in music performance and assessments, there are going to be times where they have to perform. So if they're able to do that from a younger age and in a group, it's a lot less scary, I think.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. The group's the key word there. Sorry to pop in, but right. The group is a huge difference. That's the key. That's what changes everything.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two thoughts coming along now that this topic's out there, and that's the one of the terror of performance and how we can fix that. My thinking's more around, well, is performance the best assessment of a student's progress if they're doing really creative things? So that's But that's good. I just want to throw it out there. I think a blog article is definitely on the cards for this one. All right, Bradley, your turn.
Okay. Well, I know that this is an audio podcast, but just in case it turns into a video, I'm just going to hold this up and describe to people. This is my teaching philosophy, which is a scales, a regular old-fashioned, like the Lady Justice holds. And on one side is an ear, and on the other side is an eye. And they're balanced. And so my teaching philosophy is that reading and creative skills like improvising, arranging, and the ones that Forrest mentioned, composition, should be equally taught and equally, each lesson is 50% of reading, 50% off page, or at least over a month that balances out, and so on. And usually I get a little bit of pushback when I start emphasizing the improvisation, because it can be the perception that I don't endorse reading, which I actually do. But just to stimulate the thought here, I'm working with a group of students right now where one of them, an adult student who's very strictly classically trained, she's a music minister, and has played written music her whole life, and she's on fire for what's opening up for her. And I want to just read this excerpt from an email. I'm almost scared to post it because I know it will rattle some feathers, so I want to talk about that. Here's what she writes. I confess, her words, I confess, I'm classically trained, so hugely limiting. But now that the cat is out of the bag, I never want to go back to note reading. There, I feel better now that I've confessed. Now to ask a question. And then she went on with a technical thing. So I replied, I said, I've been thinking about posting your tongue-in-cheek comment, listing you as just a student anonymously as the source in case classical purists get ruffled. Could it be on my website or maybe social media? Is that okay? Or if you let me know, could I even put your name on it? Because it probably will involve some pushback. Her reply, either way is fine with me. I'm just glad to be in this new world. So that whole issue of creativity and whether or not interpreting written music is creative, which of course it is, but what do we call what we do when we teach off-page or improvisation or creativity? What are the words for that can summarize what we're doing? And what do I do with someone who's now gone off the deep end and never wants to look at another written note as long as she lives?
Paul.
Oh, I was just going to say, just when you think about learning to read, and I know you're talking with more older students, but any student, like a school-age student, they have 1,000 hours a year, approximately 1,000 hours a year of school. At school, they learn to read. Now, if a child has a 30-minute lesson a week, they're probably going to have 20 hours a year in music lessons. So our music lessons are 2% of the school time. And at school, they're learning to read all the time, but it's part of language. And so in music, it's going to take a lot longer to learn to read. So we can develop their ear a lot more easily because they're used to listening. So that's why I think if people are aware of that, that's a really great statistic to offer them.
I remember, Bradley, when we were together talking about this, the actual word that we use about what we do. I don't think we ever really found a solution for that. We've just kind of stuck with the creative. But I remember talking about that. Nicola?
I'd suggest holistic as a word. I know it might be a bit too vague, but I think that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's what was lacking from this woman's education, that she felt like that was completely blocked off to her, and now she's sort of
Stephen Light. I expect she'll come back to a more balanced view. I like holistic. Another one is comprehensive musicianship or balanced musicianship. I know Forrest is probably just biting his tongue because he could readily demonstrate how we are actually off track on the history of teaching our instrument with this overemphasis on the page. Did I put words in your mouth there, Forrest?
Or later.
Yeah, he's going to talk about that one. Tom, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I was going to add to that. There are so many words to describe this process of when a student is completely discovering for the first time the freedom they can have on the instrument without that middleman in front of them telling them, that's the right note and the wrong note. And I've seen this process with countless students. But one analogy I often make when explaining this to people, the madness of what it is we're teaching to them, that it isn't actually that mad. It's extremely normal. I mean, we are improvising right now. I don't think any of us have a script in front of us with a plan of what we're going to exactly say. And as human beings, we interact with each other on bullet form, point form. We have an idea of the things we want to talk about to our friends or in a social situation or in a formal situation, but we're basically improvising all the time. We're using that part of our brain, that holistic part, all the time. So it sort of makes no sense that something as wonderful and as enriching as music making is entirely to a script. And one thing I would say, perhaps this student, if once she has gone in the deep end of improvisation and completely experienced that, often when they do come back to playing classical music, I'll often point out to a student, I'll say, this piece by Chopin, do you think he's just improvised the whole thing here? I mean, yes, he did write it out, but there's so many improvisory elements to the music, and that sort of takes away that binary viewpoint that there are right and wrong notes. It's more or less you don't look up to the composer anymore like you're looking at a god or something. You're looking into the composer. And I think that's even a more natural way of seeing classical music as well, because they were all improvisers back in their day as well. So,
yep.
Yeah.
I love making that point. The whole idea that all this beautiful music that we're all teaching our students is all improvised and created by someone. So let's help our students actually be able to do that themselves. That's always been a prime focus. Thank you, Bradley. I wonder whether that kind of a comment from a student will become less and less likely in the future. Let's zip to 50 years in time, when hopefully this creative movement that we're all pushing and enjoying becomes more common. Then maybe we won't have so many people that ever get to that point in their life where they realize that they've missed out on a whole half of their pedagogy training. We can hope.
Wouldn't that be great? That's a great vision. I just want to go back to Tom's comment real quick and just say, what a great, well said, first of all, but it's a great analogy to connect it to language, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the sort of the music center of our brain is also where the language center is. So in a way, we're speaking with our fingers on our instrument when we're improvising. So I think it actually, there's biological evidence for what you're describing as well.
Yeah, and I'd love to jump in, if I may, Tim, just to say, when we are only reading notes off a page, that's where our brain is. When we take our eyes and our concentration off that, we actually become emotionally connected to the music. And it's actually very hard for a student to become emotionally connected to the reading process and all that's involved in getting back onto the keyboard. So to have that happen is liberating. And I have to say that as our society gets more and more complex and our young people are just desperate to find their own voice and to have an emotional stability within themselves, it's going to become so important that this is our gift, I think, to the world, is to be able to say, we need an emotional outlet. We need something that gives us that sense of well-being and health emotionally. And music gives us that. There's no doubt about it. So, yeah, let's get off the page and inherit music as part of our being. Yeah.
Said so
I think we're all giving that the thumbs up, Lyndall.
Definitely.
All right. Just to emphasize, alongside reading, improvising alongside reading, just in case someone's like, "Oh, what are you saying? We have to not teach." Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks. Exactly.
All right. I think we might go over to Nicola. Thank you, Bradley. Nicola, what are your thoughts on your idea?
Yeah, I've been thinking about how inclusive our lessons are. This is something I try to do myself. So if we think about the lessons that most of us, maybe not so much the people on this call, but most piano teachers in general had growing up, they were quite, what we call traditional, in that you sat on the bench and you didn't move for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and you were told about theory concepts and they were explained to you, and then you just had at it. That's basically the way it went for me anyway. And I've been thinking about the fact that only certain types of students, certain types of kids and adults are going to be suited to that. And a lot of those people are the people that become piano teachers. So if you couldn't sit through that process, if that didn't suit you, you didn't become a piano teacher. And so how can we as piano teachers, who weren't necessarily probably those students unless we came to this through another path, how can we make music more inclusive for everyone, open to all different types of learners, people from different backgrounds, and all of that?
Nice thoughts.
We got to think on that one a minute. Normally, it's so hard just to go out and grab people off the street and get them interested in playing at all that we'd be happy to to teach whoever will let us teach them. But yeah, how do you make it appealing to all? You're talking about like economic classes, race, all that stuff, every
Yeah.
difference we can imagine.
And learning styles. How can we open it up to the kids who end up quitting because they're disappointed by what piano lessons actually mean, or it's not what they thought it was going to be, or they just don't get it right away and they feel like they have to?
Paul?
I think one of the most important things is if we use the whole body to learn. So using some of the philosophies of Orff, Kodály, Delcros, by internalizing the music. I recently we just opened a new school in Kent in England, a new photo.
Wow.
And the lady who's the wife of the guy who runs it is a specialist teacher for dyslexic kids. And she said, I love the way that you teach music because it's perfect for dyslexic kids. And anything that's perfect for dyslexic kids is perfect for any kid because it uses the whole body and the whole brain. And so I was really excited to hear that. And I think if you can get a lot more whole body into it through movement, through dance, through singing, body percussion instruments, that when you actually get to the bench, you've already got the music inside them.
I think what we would all agree on probably is the need for a vast array, well, not a vast array, but an array of different experiences for students in their lessons so that we can start finding what's working for their learning and so that they can start finding what's working for their learning as well from their perspective and what they're enjoying so that hopefully they don't get to that point, Nicola, where they do want to quit because we've just gone down one structured path. That would be my thinking. Forrest?
Yeah, I had an experience last night that was very interesting. I worked with a psychotherapist who has clients for 10 hours in a row, and then she comes to her piano lesson, and she's exhausted. And she said, I'm not practicing. I'm thinking I need to quit, even though I love coming here. And I said, what is it that is hard? She says, that I have to think. So we went back to a first improvisation that she did, and we just explored all these ways she could play with her eyes closed, this one simple pattern that went from one fifth to another. And it was a delightful lesson for her. So there's an example of how, with a different modality, you can keep a student who would otherwise have dropped out. And likewise, there are students who are inclined to do arranging of pop songs. We've all had those students who would drop out. So I think Nicola's question is answered by the teachers expanding their repertoire of modalities to include improvising, arranging, composing, songwriting, repertoire, tap dance. Okay, maybe not tap, well, maybe tap dance. But and the more modalities a teacher has, the more likely they are to help this wider breadth of humanity stay in lessons.
Yeah, and I do get them up and dancing sometimes. So there you go.
There you go. Good for you. Irish
Bradley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the elephant in the room here is what Paul brought up earlier. We do have, if we're lucky, 30 minutes a week. It's a very challenging thing to pose, but if we were to teach all these modalities and welcome all learners, and then we well should, what is missing is daily lessons. The daily contact, the daily music class. If we could only have the time with our students that the English teacher or the math teacher has, oh man, could we go places? I think that's the biggest barrier to what you're asking, Nicola.
Tom?
I'll also point out another elephant in the room that comes to my mind is I think between all of us, there's a myriad of and a lot of techniques to make music lessons more inclusive. But I find one struggle I've had, which I'm getting better at dealing with, is educating also the parents, because some parents are still very much obsessed by the piano exam model. Here in the UK, it's a real status symbol still, and there's and when you have a parent sort of putting pressure on their child to rush through the grades and get all these certificates when your instincts are completely the opposite for the child, that creates you really have two students for the price of one. You've got to teach the parent, you've got to talk to them, you've got to educate them, and you've got to educate the kid. You can't. I wish you could just charge double the fees for that, by the way. But it's double the energy. Let's be honest. But I haven't done a way of doing that yet. But I think it's that's one difficulty. Having said that, I think when these things start to work and when parents start to educate themselves on these matters, it's a great delight to see those transformations.
Yep.
Tom, I've got a solution for you. I'm working on some ABRSM exam preparation workshops and courses at the moment. So I'll let you know when they're but it's all using improvisation, creativity, not reading first, and they can still do the exam.
Brilliant.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, look, thank you, Nicola, for your comments. Very much sparked some good discussion. We'll go over to Paul actually now. Back to you, Paul.
Oh, I was going to say that I think that most children who are learning piano should be learning in a class or a small group situation because they can experience music with friends, make friends at music, and it nurtures the love of the arts. You know, when you are having fun and enjoying it, they can make music together. And then, of course, you can really develop oral skills from a young age. And I suggest that children should be starting to learn from the age of 5 or earlier to develop oral skills and give them some foundation strategies that help them in the future in preparation for improvisation, creativity, songwriting, all those sorts of things.
Lindell, I think you're on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm going 4. 4 years old. I love that. And you know what? I think that at that age, you know, they don't have all the constructs and all of the fears even of being exploratory. And so putting them in groups like that, they explore together. I mean, kids are very social beings in general and will interact with other kids and take ideas and run with them and take them to crazy places. And that's all a perfect, you know, fertile ground for this kind of experience in music, because music is a community thing. It isn't something that we have in isolation. Even though many adults say to me when they come, I only want to play for myself with my earphones on. That's all I want. And I respect that, because we've come from a culture where we have this fear of being wrong and, oh my goodness, judgment and assessment. And we keep driving that because of our systems of tick the boxes, but that would be another subject perhaps. But yeah, I just love this group idea, and start young. It's incredible. Yeah.
It amazes me what my students can do when they're teenagers, when they've started like that. Their oral skills and their improvisation. I've got a 14-year-old or 15-year-old, I think now. His ability to play jazz is like way off the charts, and I'm going, well, show me how to do that. I was like Bradley's saying, you're only one note away from a good note. I remember him saying that and going, I use it all the time. So thank you very much, Bradley.
You're welcome. So hey, Paul, I just want to endorse what you're saying. And I think teachers have been hearing a lot about group lessons, and I realize that's a massive subject. I just, my own experience might be helpful. The hardest thing is taking the leap. And I think of myself as a pretty open-minded guy, but I just had taught individual lessons so long. And then there are all the barriers, like I don't know how to charge. Is it worth more or less or the same? How do I talk to parents? How do I do all that? And those are all worthy discussion points. But the youngest students I accept are 12 years old. So I work with teens and up. And I would never go back. Once I took the leap into teaching just 4 students at a time, it changed everything. The students were slightly, in a friendly way, competitive with each other. I saw better practice. I saw interaction, smiles. And I didn't feel like I had to be the authority teacher that knew everything, because students were able to help each other and answer questions. It was just, I would never look back. And from there, it morphed into doing it online. And I love it. I love teaching groups. It doesn't even make sense to me to do the individual lesson, except for the occasional tune-up or masterclass or audition preparation or some kind of special project focus.
Isn't it amazing how they do actually? I've got 8 kids in a class doing grade 4 Trinity next week, and they go and help each other. So they put headphones on. The keyboards have got, or the pianos have got 2 headphone sockets. So they go and help each other. You go and we play policeman. Who wants to be the policeman? They all go, I want to be the policeman. I want to be the policeman. And they go around and check each other to see what, how they play. And they give each other feedback. And what a wonderful thing to do. And it's not scary. It's not, it's meant to, in friendship. And there is so much competition in the class to make sure that I've practiced. So they do put the work in.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor, My Music Staff. Most of you have already heard about My Music Staff and how their software helps thousands of music teachers manage their businesses more efficiently. They handle all of your student management issues, scheduling, billing, and so much more. It's what I personally use in my own studio, and it's no surprise why it's the leading studio management software. What I think really makes My Music Staff stand out is its community-driven development and personal approach to customer support. It was such a pleasant surprise jumping into My Music Staff for the first time and realizing how in tune it was with my business and the ins and outs of a music studio. Since they partner with the music community to develop their software, they've been able to anticipate what teachers need and are constantly improving their software to exceed expectations. And a more recent example of responding to community feedback was the addition of a very popular feature, streaming video and audio files directly within the My Music Staff app. And that means that no longer do you have to download files to your device. So it makes it incredibly easy to share content with your students. My Music Staff is super easy to get up and running. The transition away from paper and spreadsheets is painless. If you do need help, the quality of support is second to none, and you'll always get a fully personalised response. I have yet to see the level of attention and care I receive from My Music Staff provided by any other software platforms I use, and I use a lot of software in my business. So what have you got to lose? Just go to mymusicstaff.com and sign up for their free 30-day trial today. And for those listening who are wondering how on earth Paul teaches groups of kids and takes them through exams, then he's been very good and shared a lot of his secrets on my blog and in previous podcasts. So if you are interested in that, then we'll pop some notes in the show notes, perhaps with a couple of links. But otherwise, search my blog for Paul Myatt, or just search Tim Topham Paul Myatt Group, and I'm sure you'll be able to find some of his great articles. Thank you for sharing those, Paul. Nicola.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, just on the starting students young thing, the wonderful thing I've found about that goes back to Tom's point, is that it actually buys you time to put foundations in place, that before there's any pressure of exams, no parent of a student who's under 7 has ever badgered me about an exam. I would be quite worried if they did. So since I start students mostly at 3.5 or 4 years old, and in overlapping or small groups, that means I have all this time to explore improvisation with no expectation, oral work, all of this stuff, and start beginning reading and all of that without any pressures.
And Forrest.
I just wanted to add this idea of group. I mean, there will be teachers listening who only teach individuals, and I would encourage them to think that group could also mean duets with your students. I play duets with every student in every lesson. I just feel like that creates a foundation of musicianship like nothing else. I'm also often getting the parents involved. So we do trios, or siblings involved, or the exchange student who's coming in for a lesson. I get me, an exchange student, and a student playing, doing trios. So group is a word that can be inclusive of all these different social modalities. So I just wanted to add that point.
That's a really good point too, because I think the immediate thought when someone says group piano is a classroom of 10 kids or thereabouts, and the stresses, and I think the blood pressure rises if you've never done it before, and people freak out and just go, no, I can't do that, sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's a really good point for us to add in. And I love doing that with all of my students too. And in fact, I have the pleasure of teaching a mother and a son, and I know the mother listens to the podcast, so hello, Susan. And they are loving doing 2 piano pieces together. It's just so great to see that in their family. And Tom, we might make your comment the last one.
Yes. So is related to this topic with group, and I want to just talk about adults very briefly, because Lyndall brought up a point about about the headphone thing. You know, adults have to feel they're hiding away. They don't want their neighbours to hear them.
I thought you might have a view on that one.
Yes, and we had this problem for a while. So, you know, it felt almost impossible to get them to go and perform to each other because their blood pressure couldn't almost handle the stress of it. And the solution we came up with this was we created London's only open piano karaoke night. We got this jazz club, which we take over for the evening. And we tell all of the adult students, so you don't have to play, just come and listen to other students. And they go to the bar, grab a drink, one or two students volunteer. By the end of the night, everyone's playing 3 or 4. They just can't get off the piano. And there's a honky-tonk piano in the corner. Everyone's chatting in the background sometimes. It's a bit like, sometimes it feels a bit like background music. Sometimes it doesn't. It gets a bit more performance-like. And it just becomes this almost like a safe space for them. So it doesn't, and those barriers go down, particularly when they turn up not thinking they're going to perform. And then after 5 or 6 songs, they're like, actually, what's wrong with this? This is fun. And all of that sort of adult tension they have about being perfect and having to give a great polished performance is gone away. And we now have a creative space for them to make music, and we run it once a month, and now we're getting members of the public show up for it. So it's
I'm sure the red wine helps, right?
Exactly. Alcohol involved.
Anyone that is interested in some incredibly innovative ideas about both attracting adults and what to do with adult students, please check out the webinar. We've got it on replay, the webinar that Tom did with me all about teaching adults. We'll put a link in our show notes to that. It's phenomenal. And Tom, you just got so many great ideas. And I know many people learned some new tricks from you on that webinar. So thank you. All right. I think we'll move over to Lindell. Jump on your soapbox.
Oh, cool. Yeah, may I? All right. So I've always sort of, thought about this conundrum of does creativity only emerge after knowledge is gained, or does creativity actually drive learning? And I think that maybe for generations, and maybe this is actually the go-to framework of teachers, music teachers today, is that you have to learn all the fundamental basics first. When you've got enough of a knowledge, then we'll show you how to just dip your toe in and change that note to that note, because you still got to stay with the theory and all of that foundation stuff that we must stick to in music, right? And I think that it's kind of gotten to us to a point where I often have students who are learning a new piece, and they go and they'll play it like robots. Doesn't happen very often, okay. They play it like robots, and I just sit back going, oh my goodness, where was your music in that? Where did you go? And they answer with, oh, I'm just working it out for you. And when I've worked it out and I can play it perfectly, then I'll think about how to play it musically. And it frightens me when they say it. and I really think that in the future, I think that we are going to have a new paradigm. I hope we will, where from the very first note I learn to play, whether it be reading or whether it be my own improvisational piece that's coming out of the blue or actually coming out from inside, that every single note that I play on the piano is born out of my appreciation of music as a creative art and not as a theoretical skill. And I know that, I guess, jazz has sort of contributed to this idea because, even if you just mention the word improvisation, it goes straight to jazz, and it's only there for the upper echelon of musicians in the world who have made it, who now can improvise. And I want to kind of challenge that idea, and instead of a foundation of learning and knowledge being there, and then we layer on top of that creativity and improvisation and exploration, I want to create a situation where the very first instinct is to explore and find out, maybe it's the pentatonic black notes, and we're in this world of listening to music that goes together without any theory, without any music knowledge. That will then push it to the next question that always comes up with my little students. I want to play the white notes now. Oh, cool. Well, let's try the white notes. Hey, how about, now that we know the pattern of the black notes, 2s and 3s, how about we work out this little note here, and let's just now play with this limited palette of knowledge of C notes. Now, where does this take us? Oh my goodness, I can play hand over hand. What happens when I play high, low? Oh, wow, this is beautiful. What if I play like jumping frog? Oh my goodness, my C's turned into frogs. And now I can play them like beautiful dancing butterflies. That sounds entirely different. Oh, great. Oh, what are these other keys here? Oh, I'm glad you asked. And so we build and I guess we create an ecosystem, if I can use that analogy, where everything supports this whole growth of ideas. And the ecosystem is the knowledge, the technique, the rote learning, the repertoire, the reading, the composition that grows and bubbles up through this atmosphere and this environment of creativity. I love that idea. I hope that that's where we're going.
It's about exploratory learning, I think, is kind of the approach, isn't it? And my thinking is that one of the biggest challenges with that for many teachers is that it is so exploratory and flexible that it's hard to, it's risky, but it's also hard to know what to do if there's no structure or framework to it. So for you,
Right.
it's obviously, it flows. It's a very natural progression, and it's when you teach it. And I know your resources help other teachers do this, but I would imagine that's can be a bit of a stumbling block, which is why, of course, method books have become so popular.
Yeah, and I'm not saying let's just, bounce around in this creative bubble, because that's not going to work. And so, yeah, the programs that I've created to encourage that environment have got an infinite amount of structure behind it, because otherwise we're actually just saying, hey, you know what, you don't really need a teacher, you could just bounce around YouTube, right? Don't worry about the gaps that appear. We don't want gaps to appear, and we want a strategy of pedagogy, and it's really important. And we want our students to understand reading and to learn reading in the same way, though, in the same way that they're going to push up that growth of needing to have notes on a page so that they can broaden their understanding of music and read music that other people have come up with in their creative ecosystem and their whole environment. And then to be able to write music and hand it on.
Yep. Bradley, you waved your hand before.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to talk about I like what did you use the word experiential? How did you describe the discovery piece? Well, I'm working at the moment with I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were to say, okay.
Keep going.
Okay, I happen to be working as an advisory board with a national conference that is putting together a creative track. And so we're doing similar meetings to this with many minds coming together. And they're using the words experiential improvisation or creativity, and then the other side is nuts and bolts. So experiential is what you described, black keys. You listen and hear and experience what you're doing. And the other side of that is maybe a little bit more the theory and the scales and what notes and how is this chord constructed. And what evolved in the conversation is that they wanted to mirror the natural learning process through that day, so that early in the day it would be experiential, and as the day went on, it became more nuts and bolts. Do you see experiential as an early approach to improvisation, and then later the sort of the details? Here's a blues lick, here's a scale, here's that's kind of how I see it. So be interested if I think they're both essential is what I'm trying to say, but I see them as one before the other.
I think it depends on the age, really. So if you're teaching very young children, you have to have experiential because they have no knowledge. So,
True.
So as they get older, they have some knowledge. I was going to give an example. This is, the ABRSM new 2019 syllabus. There's a song at the end of it called The Egyptian Level. It uses this, which is so creative. So they have put a poem into it called Mummies Here, Mummies There, Mummies in Their Underwear. And it goes on. It's very funny. But we did an activity at our conference with this. And I said, I want you to make up something. And using these 5 notes and the poem, Mummies Here, Mummies There, Mummies in Their Underwear. And so on it went. A couple of the teachers were absolutely petrified. And I said, there's no right or wrong. It's okay. And they finally went, okay, I can do this. It's okay. And then they saw some other people, and it really opened up the opportunity to be creative. And so you can do some very, very simple things using text and a 5-note pattern that sounds interesting, that can be so simple. And then perfectly related to a grade 1 piece, and you've just turned a creative activity into an exam piece.
Nice work for
Brilliant.
Lindell, did you want to wrap that up? I'm conscious of time, so we might move on to Forrest in a sec.
Yeah, I just wanted to just say along those same lines that if you teach a simple idea like if Forrest teaches patterns, a pattern in a vacation, these are incredibly simple and yet incredibly complex if you were to actually go under the bonnet and have a look at the bonnet. That's the front of the car for you American guys. It's not the boot.
The trunk.
If you look under that, into the engine, there is a massive complexity that's happening under there. Does it mean I have to teach that in order for a student to enjoy it and celebrate it and revel in using that? I'm even now thinking, is it necessary to talk about one coming before the other? Or is it this beautiful interaction of knowledge and experience that is what we must hold in balance, like your scales there, Bradley. I love those scales. Yeah.
That was a nice wrap back to Bradley. We've mentioned balance a few times. I think this could be the basis of the conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lindell. Forrest, what's your thinking at the moment?
I've been thinking a lot the last few years about music history and been researching it. And I just put out a book that is not the big book I hope to put out someday, but it's a smaller book that talks about the big change that happened in music education in the middle of the 19th century. I mean, if you look back to Bach, he taught his students to improvise, arrange, and compose. And when you were a musician in Bach's time, if you couldn't improvise at a keyboard instrument, you were not employed. When he was 40, there was an audition at a Hamburg cathedral, and there was an audition. 5 out of the 6 requirements had to do with improvisation. But when the printing industry exploded in the early 19th century, and say the Well-Tempered Clavier was printed for the first time in 1800, you had suddenly all these masterworks available. And you begin to have teachers teach them, the rise of conservatories. All these teachers went to these European conservatories, came back to the States, went around the world. And this model of teaching literature and the technique and the theory became the dominant model, and I call it the performer paradigm. Now, there's nothing wrong with the performer paradigm, except that it's one-sided. We have forgotten this legacy of pedagogy that predates it. And what I've been trying to do with my 4 arts is restore what's been lost. And in a sense, that's what Bradley's talking about, the balancing. I call it integration, where we're losing, we lost something and we're bringing it back. And it's very comparable to what's happening in medicine right now. What we're doing is we're bringing back the holistic kind of approaches that were used before. Likewise with farming and the food movement, we're simply bringing back things that were lost, like organic farming, like local farming. So I view it as integration rather than balance. And I see it as inevitable. We cannot deny our legacy, our lineage much longer. It's just students are craving it. We're craving to be whole. So that's my take.
Forrest, one of the things also that was happening was as they into the 19th century, the composers started writing down the cadenzas because they could, because paper was readily available. So it was more about, I want you to play what is written on the page. And then, of course, with the advent in London in the early 1800s of the ABRSM, you got this whole exam syllabus creating a situation where people had to read because they were doing the piano exam. So it just has kept going for so many years. And all those other skills have been forgotten, as you said.
But what I see the future as then is what we're all trying to do. I see, even though we're in the present, I see us as harbingers of what's to come, which is this grand revival. And I'm hoping by the time I die, I look around the world and students everywhere are viewing improvisation, arranging, songwriting as, oh, well, of course, that's what you do in music lessons. You don't just play the music of others. It's very comparable to studying art. When you go and study art, you go through a stage of copying the works of the masters, but you do that to gain technique. If you keep doing that, you're called a counterfeiter. But in we forget that. I mean, the whole reason Bach studied the works of other people was to inspire him. He wrote that it gives him ideas. That's why he didn't bother often to even write down the pieces, like in the Anna Magdalena Bach notebook, like Petzold. He didn't even write down his name. The composers weren't important. What was important was the ideas that were gained from reading the works of others and how you could bring those ideas back to fuel your own creativity. So what I'm viewing it as is we will return music to this big art where you study the works of others to feed your own ideas.
I also like the art analogy with regard to art lessons at school. It's such a simple analogy that's so often missed, in that all art lessons generally result in, well, after a period of time, a few weeks, students will bring home something that they've created from scratch. They'll learn how to pot and they'll make a hideous bowl. Or they'll learn how to paint and they'll bring home I'm being facetious, but yeah, why aren't we doing that on a regular basis in music education? That, to me, is a missed opportunity, and that relates beautifully to your thinking on art. Bradley.
Yeah, Forrest, I love that you always bring that historical perspective to it. And I will just also add to it that that jazz rescued improvisation for Western music. And the reason I want to say that is that we can talk about styles and genres, but the approach of what we're talking about here about finding your own notes is what it mostly comes to. Picking your own notes, that's what's different than the written page, is as an approach independent of style. And then all the rhythmic underpinnings and the figures and the passages and the stylistics and the ornaments, all those things give it a style. So that's why Lindell's comment earlier about when you say jazz, people go right to improvisation. The great gift of jazz, or even if you hate every note of it you hear, is that it got us back on track with the kind of a lost art form that you're talking about. And if I could, I just want to say one thing that has come up interestingly about that. A lot of times for people entering improvisation through a lifetime of classical music, they say, well, can we do classical improvisation first? Which makes sense. You would want to work through the familiar. But just there's this astonishing fact. It's actually a lot easier to improvise in a jazz environment than a classical one, for the simple reason that jazz chords have more notes in them. So if I have a C chord, C, E, G, that leaves 4 notes of the C major scale that are not in that chord. But if I have a jazz chord of C major 7 with a B on top, or perhaps a D, now I only have 2 notes that aren't in that chord. And in fact, the A sounds pretty good too. So when you have a fantastically written chord, it's almost impossible to sound bad. What terrifies me is trying to make a coherent improvisation over a 1, 4, and 5. That's actually, I think, much harder. So, just a little side point.
Tom.
Yeah, well, actually, that regarding improvisation, that thought, often when I have a lot of adult students who say, oh, improvisation's random, I need to know theory first, and they have all these assumptions, I often tell them that going from a historical perspective, I explain to them, do you know this piano that you're in front of is this amazing tuning system that has been created for you, that is just sitting there. You can be in this key, you can go to that key. It doesn't matter which key you go to, which scale you change key to. It doesn't matter if you just find any 3 notes or 4 notes or 5 notes and put them together. There is a name for that chord. And, then I'll get them to do all of these random things. And I often tell them, random does not actually exist. You cannot possibly be random. It's impossible to be random. And of course, they won't believe me, particularly if they're, an accountant or someone like that. So and then they'll just, they'll play a couple of, really random chords. And then I'll say, okay, that was a lovely C major 7 flat and 5. And then you went to the Lydian scale on F, and then you did that and that. And that's the thing with it really doesn't matter which way these things go in the order, because they're all interconnected.
I have to say, just going back to wrap up your thoughts, Forrest, I love hearing you speak about the history, and I've read a lot of what you've written about it too, and we've had many conversations. And so while you might not have finished the big book, I know that you've got a collection of essays that are available on your site too. So we'll pop a link in our show notes to those. If people want to dive a little bit more into Forrest, thinking about the history, where we've come from, where we might be going, then I would highly recommend those. They're great. So thank you, Forrest. And finally, Tom, over to you.
Thank you. Well, firstly, just let me say what an honour it's been to be part of this discussion today. Already, I've just got so many new ideas and inspiration. At the moment, I'm in a rather chaotic part of my life. I'm actually moving house right now. So this is the only corner of my flat that doesn't have boxes everywhere. And I'm basically squeezed into this corner. That's why there isn't much light here. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel, obviously, because I'll be moving to a bigger studio soon. So I've just got a couple of, while today I was packing my many boxes of stuff, I was sitting on my 10th box of vinyl thinking, in the age of Spotify, why the heck do I still have all this vinyl? And it got me thinking of a very, very interesting question, because about the new and the old, and is it really a binary question in music education or in music in general? And something as absurd as something in the age of digital technology, why is vinyl making such a resurgence? It shows that people do like things that are old as well as things that are new. And it got me thinking of a couple of other points, because obviously, one of the great things about the work Tim does is in enlightening many piano teachers around the world, music educators around the world, about all these wonderful new things we should do. Some of these new things have been around for many years. Some of them seem very foreign to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it actually isn't a binary question. So what I mean by binary question, this idea of classical versus jazz versus pop, improvisation versus notation, traditional versus modern, digital versus analog, and so on. And I just thought maybe the future, when the world has changed a little bit more and accepted a lot of these new things, maybe there is more of an integration that's going to be part of driving a successful music education. So here are a couple of examples that came into my head while I was sitting on these boxes. What about a singer-songwriter who studies songwriting? Maybe they could learn about Bach and polyphony so they can craft their own string quartet arrangements to produce more daring arrangements in their pop music. Or what about in the future a sound designer who writes movie soundtracks, who has some training in classical piano and harmony to get better ideas? I've met so many amazing, accomplished sound designers who come to me for music lessons, and when they discover that what an E major 7 is, they didn't have to actually buy a £1,000 sample of the tracks. What about a classical composer or pianist with a very traditional education who adds to their program knowledge on technology, sound design, mixing, microphone placement? Is that going to give them a professional edge as a classical musician? And what I'm saying is I'm talking about the integration of skills. And of course, not everybody can be good at everything. I'm certainly not, nor does everybody need to be. But we need to realize, I think, as teachers, that the power of getting our students who might have one musical skill, the absolute power of fusing it with another seemingly unrelated music skill. And I think as human beings, we're so good at putting things into little boxes. But when you sort of open all those boxes and mix things together, some really exciting things happen.
Lindell.
I love that concept. And just last night, I got a phone call from a 17-year-old kid who said, "Oh, I'm looking for a music teacher. Can you teach me?" And I was asking him about, well, what kind of thing do you want to get out of this? What's your background? Blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that he creates drum tracks. And I sort of went, wow, okay, so cool. So he uses, all these fantastic computer programs to do it with. And I said, "But I'm not a drum teacher." He goes, "No, I don't want to learn drum or anything. I want to learn the keys because that's going to help me understand music." And I just went, this is exactly what you're talking about. This is so exciting. And it's a whole new concept, I think, to a piano teacher who traditionally this is the instrument they've had. And I have to say, even writing the scores for our movie tracks that we use as part of our materials, our resources in the Play a Story and the Score a Story program, is that I've now joined all of these amazing groups of screen composers who a lot of them actually don't play the piano. And so we're chatting and they're going, "Well, wish I knew how to play the piano. That would be a great asset to me voicing amazing string quartets for this new fantastic space movie that's just I've been commissioned to write the score for." And I think that whole idea of crossing into different musical vocations, I guess, is brilliant. And what an exciting future that is. I want to be in that one. Gosh, I was just 20 years younger.
I've also taken on music producer types of young adults who have started making beats and music on using software but not understanding how it works, but they have a musical sense about what sounds good and they want to know how to create it from scratch rather than just using software and samples. And so just teaching them the basics of chord progressions, which is what most dance music is all based on, just, as you've said, opens up a huge world of possibilities for them suddenly. Bradley.
Yeah, Tom, I just wanted to, what was running through my mind while you said that beautiful statement is if we were thinking of this as vocational training, as it was thought into Forrest's history, a bit, we were going after that chapel job or whatever, you're right about the boxes. In music schools and at the college level and so on, everything is based on specialist. I'm a performance major. I'm a piano pedagogy major. I'm a sound recording major. But the fact is, and I bet if we listed our resumes, we would find it true for every person here, that musicians who actually make a living wear many hats. I don't know anybody who only does one thing. I mean, Beethoven was a teacher, and these guys perform, and Mozart. The point is, it's actually the variety of skills that enable us to put together a custom track as a small business person, and somehow we don't teach that though. You have to go out and discover that on your own. So I drink a toast to your vision for the future. I agree with it,
Paul.
I was just going to say that when you were talking about the vinyl, and today I was just thinking of Peter Allen's song "Everything Old Is New Again," and so it keeps coming around.
Yes. Look, what a fantastic way to finish too. Thank you so much, everyone. I know that we're just at about an hour or just a bit over, so I think that's a good time to wrap. We have just opened 7 Pandora's boxes of thoughts and ideas, and we could, of course, chat about this for much longer, and perhaps next year we can follow up some of these conversations when we start 2019 season 1. But until then, I'm going to say farewell. Actually, no, there was one thing I wanted to do because, Paul, you mentioned a Bradley quote right near the start. Nicola, you've quoted Bradley in a recent podcast. Can you remember what that quote was?
I can't remember right now. I know that I did. Yeah.
Yes, you did. And Bradley, I have to say, I use "when in doubt, pent out." I get my students that is recited all the time. I just remind them, when in doubt, pent out. Does anyone else using Bradley users? Yeah, Lindell. Look at the effect that you've had, Bradley.
She said under the bonnet, and I often say under the hood. Let's get under the hood of the piece. So that's been one I've been seeing popping up other places, thinking, oh, I think I might have invented that. But
you need to write all these down in a book, Bradley.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remembered what it was, Tim. It was his when a student plays nothing because they're too terrified for an improvisation, and he says, "What a great use of rests."
Yes, that's right. Yes, you did that. Your podcast, it was all about getting timid beginners to improvise, and that was the thing. Yes, beautiful use of silence. Well done. So look, Bradley, thank you for that. Thank you to Forrest, Nicola, Lindell, Paul, and Tom. You guys are all superstars. The contributions that you're making around the world in all the different areas and impacts that you're having on teachers is phenomenal. So keep it up. And thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's a privilege to be with you all. Wow, what great company.
Truly.
Exactly. Fantastic.
It's an honor.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed creating it and chatting to our great guests. Let's give them all a little round of applause wherever you are, in your car or walking the dog. It's going to look pretty weird, isn't it? But, let's do it anyway. Why not? Bit of fun. I can't wait to see what the future holds for piano teaching, as we've discussed today. But what I do know is that it's only going to get more innovative and creative and exciting over the coming years. And I'm so glad that you are a part of it. And I'm so thankful for all the support that you give me in bringing together great people like this and putting out the content that I love sharing with teachers like you. So keep it up. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm truly excited that today is the day that we're going to be launching my Ultimate Creative Piano Teaching Podcast Bundle. 150 creative lesson ideas and counting is the name for this product. And let me tell you about what you get with this. You get 145 episodes available on MP3, so audio download, so that you can listen to them instantly on any device, and you can copy them to whichever computer that you wish to listen to. And by the way, I know there's 150 episodes and you're getting about 145, and that's just due to some copyright and licensing arrangements with some of those episodes. You'll also get 40 podcast freebies and handouts and over 100 transcripts. So all of those PDF files are all there for you, plus some freebies that I'm going to tell you about in just a second. Really importantly, I think, is that you also get something I haven't shared anywhere else, and that's a content index that categorizes all the episodes we've ever done by topic as well as by guest. So that means if you're looking for something about group teaching, you can search for group teaching and find all the episodes that have featured group teaching discussions. Or if you're interested in oral training, you can again search by topic. Likewise, if you're really keen to, remember me interviewing John Schmidt from the Piano Guys, and you're like, what episode was that? Then you can quickly find that with our topic index. Now, as well as that, we're giving away a whole lot of freebies. So including some of my own resources and lesson plans, like my 3 keys to a comprehensive lesson plan, my left-hand pattern worksheet, and my first adult lesson checklist. If you haven't seen that, then that is fantastic for any teenage or adult transfer students. And what I've also done is I've asked some of the interview guests that have been on the show over the last 150 episodes to share some of their best resources and discounts. So you're going to enjoy some freebies from people like the Piano Safari team, Musical U, Music Educator Resources, that's Jennifer Fox, Piano Picnic, and many more. Forrest Kinney is giving a discount off all his books. Joyce Ong is actually sharing her book, The Art of Creative Business. The whole book, it's going to be there for you. Leela Viss is sharing information. Marie Lee is talking about working with parents. And we've got Wendy from Wendy's Music. We've got Katie Wardrobe from Midnight Music. She's provided the ultimate free tech resource guide for 2018 and 19. So all of that is there, and we're giving it to you on this bundle. You have no idea how much we've packed into this thing. In fact, we basically ran out of room. It's got so much in there. And as I mentioned before, all of this is delivered to your door no matter where you are in the world. And it really is the podcast bundle that every piano teacher should own. And you can get your hands on it right now. Today's the launch day, whenever you're listening to this, by heading to timtopham.com/bundle. That's BUNDLE. And even if you're listening to this episode after December 7, which is our official launch, you can still check it out, but it is only available for a limited time. So I would recommend you get onto that as soon as you can. And the current price we're offering is just $39 for Inner Circle members and $49 if you're not a member of my Inner Circle yet. So again, the address to go to if you're interested in grabbing my Ultimate Creative Piano Teaching Podcast bundle and getting it delivered to your door, included in that price, by the way, timtopham.com/bundle, BUNDLE. All right, so let's finish up with just a couple of quick reminders. One is that my next piano pivot is going to be held in the second half of January. So as you may remember, and we talked about this on the last episode, the Piano Pivot is my sort of 5-day program of studio change and setup that is just fantastic to do at the start of a year, which is why we're running it in January. And you can pick it up and take hold of it and run through it whenever you want. But we're going to be starting our first cohort or our next cohort in January. So if you're interested in that, then we'll definitely be emailing you about it. But you can also head to timtopham.com/pivot, PIVOT, if you want to get in early. So check that out now if you wish. And if you want to do that over your Christmas, New Year break, then you can definitely get started when you wish. And finally, if you haven't yet reviewed the podcast and you're listening now to episode 150, then please do take the time. It really is appreciated. It does help me rank and get a bit more exposure for the work that we do putting these episodes together. So if you have received any value over any of the episodes that you've listened to, then please, could you leave me a review? And the two places to leave a review that are really valuable for me and running this business, supporting you guys, is on iTunes and on Facebook. So if you pick one of those places, that would be so fantastic. And I do read every single review, and I often reach out to people who have taken the time to leave a review. If you're interested in the process or you're not too sure how to do it, Facebook's fairly straightforward. Just head to my Facebook page. But on iTunes, if you're unsure, you can head to timtopham.com/iTunes, and I've given you all the instructions. Well, that's it from me for 2018. I do so hope that you've enjoyed the 4 seasons that we've run this year, and of course, all the back catalogue of episodes that you can access at any time from the Tim Topham Piano Teaching app on iOS and Android phones. Just search for my name in the App Store. You'll be able to find that. And all the show notes, of course, are available at timtopham.com/podcast, which is a full listing of all the podcasts. And remember that you can just type in the episode number as well if you want to go straight to a particular episode. timtopham.com/episode 123, whatever the episode is. And remember, of course, if you grab the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast bundle, then you'll get a full index of all these episodes by both guest and topic. It's an unbelievable time saver, and it's not available on the website. So another great reason to grab that resource. So this Christmas, I'm actually off to enjoy a bit of a white Christmas in the UK with my partner's family before heading briefly to Europe and then back to Australia in mid-January when we'll hit the ground running again, preparing for all the great resources, courses, videos, blog posts, etc. that we'll be bringing out starting early in February. And we will continue to put out content over the break as well. So you certainly won't get left behind, but no more podcast episodes until Season 1 2019 begins with a date that we're still yet to confirm. And a quick reminder too that just regarding the transcripts, all my Inner Circle members, you can access the transcripts in our resource library with any freebies, any discounts. You don't need to add your email address to any of those forms. You've got access fully inside the members area and, of course, on the new members app as well. And if you're not yet a member of my Inner Circle community, then please do explore the amazing benefits and the changes we're making in piano teachers' lives around the world by going to timtopham.com/community. I will mention too that next year is not looking quite so busy for me with regard to speaking and traveling, which I'm quite happy about. But if you want to put some dates in your diary and think about which conferences you might attend, I love catching up with people who listen to the podcast and read the blog and who are members, of course. So I'll be heading to the NCKP, the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy in Chicago in July, and also the Australian Piano Pedagogy Conference, which is in Brisbane, also in July next year. So if you can make it to either of those two events, then we will definitely be able to catch up. So that's it, everyone. Happy 150th episode. Until next year, I'm Tim Topham, and this is the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you next year.
Ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. We'd love to help take your teaching to the next level as a member of our supportive community. Use the coupon Piano Podcast for $100 off an annual membership of Tim's Inner Circle today. To find out more, head to timtopham.com/community.